Hey everybody, Teching 101 here, and I knew it! I knew this SBS was gonna be good. I could feel it in my bones. You know what I mean? I was like, oh yeah, volume 113. I'm just feeling the vibes off of this one, the aura, you know? So first of all, the cover of Tankobon 113 looks incredible. Gunko has blue hair now, so that's good for her. That's cool. We get to see the God's Knights. We see Scopper right there in the center, and we have Luffy. But yeah, I'm just gonna get this started because, like, oh my god, Oda has really been laying on the world building thick in the last few SBSs, and I think it's because Oda will always do this when it becomes relevant to the story. Like, the name of the planet being Blue Planet, which was also revealed in a recent SBS, wasn't really that important to the Straw Hats' journey, but now that we're getting into the endgame stuff and we're learning more about, like, oh, hey, by the way, if you thought the Void Century was as far back as things got interesting, oh, no, 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 no. Now we have the First Age, and the Second Age, and the Third Age, and the Void Century is, like, obviously not just all of it, and then the Gorosei being named after planets and everything like that. So now the planet's name is starting to be relevant, and we're gonna kick it off with the very first question that my mind got blown, and it blew a lot of people that have been studying One Piece for a long time. Artor literally, like, texted me as soon as the SBS. I didn't even read the whole thing before he messaged me, like, we have a calendar, and I'm like, oh my god, we have a calendar, guys. An actual calendar. I cannot explain to you. Like, we've already had the calendar. The calendars have been mentioned before, but Oda actually gave us dates for the calendar. Oh my god, I'm so happy. You might be thinking that's not a big deal. Like, I want to know more shit about, like, hockey or devil fruit abilities, or I want to know about, Mihawk's backstory or something. But, like, okay, it's nice to know what year it is. No, it's very amazing to know what year it is. The current year in the One Piece world, there's actually two different calendars, but the current year is 1541. And that's on the age of the Sea Circle calendar, the Kaienreki calendar. There's another calendar system called the Age of Heaven calendar, and Oda confirms that both of these calendars are still in use in the One Piece world, much like how our world has multiple different calendars depending on the part of the world, and cultural and also religious. You know, they could have certain calendars. The Age of Heaven calendar, it is the year 4141. 4141. That's the year of the Age of Heaven, the Tenreki calendar. Now, people that have been reading One Piece a lot and have studied One Piece a lot are probably aware that these calendars were mentioned earlier in the story. Remember the scene in the Alubarna crypt when Crocodile takes Cobra down there and, like, basically just nails him to a wall? That was a pretty brutal scene. But then Robin was there, and then you see the poneglyph and everything, and then Crocodile is like, ah, yes, my master plan, the Utopia project, is finally underway. Robin, read the poneglyph and tell me the location of Pluton. And then Robin just kind of goes over there and starts reciting, like, Alabasta history, which is very fascinating to me. She's like, ah, yes, the great temple was erected in Eremalu in the year 300 whatever. She's using Age of Heaven. That is the specific calendar system, Tenreki, that she is utilizing there. Now, it turns out that what was written on the poneglyph was actually not history. It was indeed the location of Pluton, specifically mentioning Wano was the place you could find it. Side note, I wonder what Crocodile would have done if Robin had directly told him, oh, yeah, Pluton, it says where it is. It's in Wano, or under Wano, depending on how you read this. Like, what would Crocodile have done there? Like, oh, the place that one of the Yonko, arguably the strongest pirate in the entire world, lives? The guy that can turn into a giant dragon that has gathered together some of the strongest Zoan users on the entire planet. That's where Pluton is. Would Crocodile have tried to figure out a way, like, even if he would have succeeded, like, and would have just defeated the Straw Hats there and then at Alabasta, I don't know if he would have been able to do much about Pluton. I guess he could have tried to ally with Kaido, but I think Kaido would have been able to see through that. Like, I don't know. But anyway, Robin wasn't reading something that was on the poneglyph, but that was real history. I'm assuming they had stayed in Alabasta for a while. I'm assuming all that information she was reading was stuff she had, read about in books, and she was just throwing that on there to kind of throw off Crocodile, right? Okay, that was the idea, right? So that was kind of the first time we heard about the Age of Heaven calendar. And then later on, shortly thereafter, when we get to Jaya and then we start getting into Skypiea, they get Nolan's logbook. And Nolan's logbook is mentioning like specific months and days. By the way, there is like a 12-month calendar system, and it's like there's like a June and a July and everything like that on this calendar. Oda's probably just doing that to make it simple, right? But yeah, that was mentioned that Nolan's adventures at Shandora and the City of Gold was like around 400 years ago. And Oda specifies right here that he was essentially rounding to make it nice and even 400. The exact date, now that we have real dates, that Nolan found Shandora and met Kalgara and, had that friendship and everything, that occurred 419 years ago exactly. The fact that we now have the exact year for that is incredible. So, really quick, and I'm sure Artur's going to make a whole video about this if he's not already working on one right now, going way more in-depth with the calendar system. But let me just give you some key events in the One Piece world that we now have exact dates for. Okay, so keeping in mind that with the two calendar systems, the Sea Circle calendar, it is currently the year 1541, and the Heaven calendar, it is currently the year 4141. All right, so there's a 2600 year gap of difference between these two calendar systems. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But Roger's execution 24 years ago and the start of the Great Pirate Era, that occurred on the Sea Circle calendar year 1517, and on the Heaven calendar 4117. God Valley, right now in the flashback in the manga, 38 years ago, that was the year 1503 Sea Circle calendar, 4103 Heaven calendar. Nolan's flashback, as I said, was in the year 1122 Sea Circle and 3722 in the Heaven calendar. Going even further back, the beginning of the Void Century, 900 years ago, was around the 600s, because we don't have the exact date on when, the Void Century started, but it was around the 600s on the Sea Circle calendar and the 3200s in the Heaven calendar. And then also, during Skypiea, when Robin was walking around Upper Yard, she had a bunch of ruins and pillars that she was reading as the city from Shandora. Now, Nolan might have visited the city of Shandora 419 years ago, exactly, but that was not when the city was prospering. In fact, I've been planning to do a video on the City of Gold for the longest time now. Now might be the best time to do this shit. But anyway, that was when it was already in decline. Like, if you go back and look at when Nolan arrived, the city was kind of covered in moss and everything. It still looked really impressive, but clearly not at the peak of the civilization. So when Robin was walking around Upper Yard, she sees a piece of pillar or a ruin or a cenotaph or something, and she's reading it, and it says on it that the city was built and began to prosper around 1100 years ago, which would put it around the year 400 Sea Circle and 3000 Heaven calendar, somewhere around that ballpark, okay? I want to bring up something very particular here, and it revolves around the earliest dates that we are given, and they're approximations, but the earliest moments in time that are mentioned in recorded history in the One Piece world, okay? So, the furthest back that any character has ever mentioned in recorded history, because they do talk about, the age of dinosaurs, which was, millions of years ago when we were on Little Garden, right? But the Tree of Knowledge at Ohara was mentioned to be planted 5,000 years ago. All right? Now, this is crucial because that means there were people living on Ohara that were the ancestors of the scholars that directly planted this tree 5 millennia ago. All right? So they had a culture. They had a civilization at that point. All right? This moment took place before either calendar system was in use. All right, this is minus 3,500 Sea Circle and minus 900 before the beginning of the Heaven calendar. So this is nearly 1,000 years before the heaven calendar, the older one, started to become used. We don't know if exactly it works the same way in our world, like if there's a BC and an AD and sort of situation like that, right? So this is most likely the first age, when the tree of knowledge was planted that far back ago, when the civilizations were apparently super advanced. And I would also assume that at the end of the first age is maybe when the heaven calendar started. And here's something. The second furthest back moment in recorded history that was mentioned was actually mentioned by a random guard at Alabasta. This was in chapter 188. A random guard mentioned that the palace at Alubarna has existed and has been the home of the royal family for the last 4,000 years. So 5,000 years ago was the planting of the Tree of Knowledge. 4,000 years ago was when the palace at Alubarna was constructed. So when was this? Well, obviously it was well before the sea circle calendar, but it was about 100 years or so, like the first century or getting into the second century of the Age of Heaven, the Tenreki calendar. So this, and also all of that history that Robin reads off, Kahira conquers Alabasta, the Betane dynasty of Tamar begins in Alabasta, the Great Toph Temple, oh, they built a temple to Toph, Avatar, was completed in Aramalu. All of these dates occur within the first few centuries of the heaven calendar. So the palace was built in the 100s, and then Kahira, somebody named Kahira, conquers Alabasta in 239 Age of Heaven. All right, so all of this stuff, the earliest history of Alabasta, seems to coincide very closely with the beginning of this new calendar system, Age of Heaven. So there's definitely something that went on there and everybody started to rebuild. Or maybe like if the first age really was this super advanced technological like society, maybe more advanced than what we have right now, similar to stuff that we saw at Egghead. They had like holograms and robots and all sorts of shit. And then a massive cataclysm occurred and then boom, wiped everything out, right? And then it's like, all right, we got to kind of start over from scratch. We're starting over from like, you know, ancient Mesopotamia, like ancient civilization. Like this is like early Egypt. Like we're building, this is like Old Kingdom or even before that to like pre-dynastic Egypt and stuff. So we're starting really, really early on with this. At the beginning of the heaven calendar is the beginning of when Alabasta as a civilization started. And Alabasta is mentioned to be like one of the oldest civilizations on the planet. So that gives you an idea with that. Okay, so I could go more and more on this. I go on and on about this. I can make an entire video. Trust me, I will. But I'm going to stop for here because there's other questions we need to get through. But oh my God, we have a calendar system. Okay. Oh yeah. Queen is Franky's dad. Like, that one is kind of, we already sort of understood that. That was mentioned a while ago, and Oda even directly brings up the mentions in the Vivra cards that the dates of when Queen abandoned Franky, or when he abandoned his son, and then when Franky was adopted by Tom, that lines up perfectly. He's just like, ah, yes, you seem to understand all the dates lined up. Oh, man, I didn't know readers would catch on something like that. Yes, no, they're not. They are. So Franky is, in fact, Queen, or his real name is Sion, Sion's son. Now, why didn't they interact at all during Wano? Well, you got to assume at this point it's been like about 30 years or so. I think a little less than 30 years, but like Queen looked a lot different back then. Franky does not know he goes by Queen. He would probably know him by his father's real name, Sion. And even so, it really does seem like Franky kind of just blotted all that shit out of his memory. He views Tom and Kokoro as his real parents and Iceberg as his brother. You know what I mean? Like, that was the life that he chose, and he grew up in Water 7. So I'm sure Franky kind of just ignored it. I made a whole video about this too, but when it was first mentioned, or at least implied, that he just kind of forgets about, like, yeah, whatever, my parents were pirates, they abandoned me, they didn't care about me, I don't really care about them anymore, this is my real family, okay? And now he's with the Straw Hats, right? So it is interesting though when you think back on it. Like, you could say Sanji beat the shit out of Franky's dad, and that's what happened. That is canonically what happened in the story. So there we go. For more information on this, go check check out my video I made on Cyan, on Queen being Franky's father, and we go into all that stuff there, and it's very interesting. And you can also see similarities in terms of their personality. Like, Queen is very funky, and Franky is very super. So you could definitely see they're both cyborgs. Like, it's there. All right. Is there ever going to be a touching family reunion? I would love for Oda to have something like off to the side, like at some point during the final war, maybe Queen ends up there, Franky is there, and they're like, they just kind of look at each other for 5 seconds, like they sort of remember each other, but they're like, you know, Queen is a very shitty father, and then Franky has blotted everything about him out of his mind, so they just kind of look at each other for 5 seconds like, do I know you from somewhere? Nah, you must be thinking of someone else. Yeah, sorry. And then that would be it. That would be hilarious. That would be great. You know, it just goes to show, you know, it's more about a found family rather than, you know, your actual biological family, right? We got an awesome Vivi question or a Vivi artwork. Oda did the same thing he did with all the other Straw Hats and Sabo and Ace, drawing Vivi older at age 40 and at age 60 in a good universe where everything's awesome, and then the bad universe where things are not so awesome. So Vivi at age 40 looks pretty much the same as she does now. Same thing when she looks at age 60. Same thing with Robin and Nami. In the good universe where everything's awesome, you know, they just don't age, like, at all. Vivi is wearing glasses at age 40, but not at age 60, so I'm assuming they're just, like, reading glasses, just like how Nami does read with glasses, but you very rarely ever see her wearing them. You see them in Skypiea. I think that's, like, the only time we see Nami wearing her glasses. But yeah, this is Vivi at age 40 and 60. I think she looks very, like, regal at age 60. Very prim and proper, like she always did. But she really has the air of, like, she is the queen of Alabasta at age 60. You know what I mean? And, yeah, that's pretty cool. In age 40, she's asking Karu to, like, go, Karu, to the east. Like, she's gonna go visit Luffy or whoever that's living in the east, I suppose. After the Straw Hats adventures are over, like, I'm sure Usopp is gonna go back to Syrup Village and spend some time there, but then go off on other adventures, you know, so they might do that. They might stop by their hometowns every now and then. Nami would go back to Kokoyashi, but continue traveling the world. I feel like most of the Straw Hats would do that. Also implies that Karu is going to survive for another 20 years, so that's good. Good job, Karu. I have him up here. Good job, Karu. The lifespan of a supersonic duck is quite considerable. All right. I actually don't know how long, like, normal, like, domesticated ducks live. It's probably not 20 years, but what do I know? They might live like parrots, right? And then at age 60, she's saying, "Oh my, you're quite good." I'm not sure what the implication is with that statement, but that's what she's saying at age 60. So there we go. Then we have the bad universe. Whoa, thunderclap, okay? At age 40 in the bad universe, Vivi seems to be a pirate now. Very rough. She seems to be covered in dirt and grime and has a scar on her forehead down through her eye, which actually makes her kind of look pretty badass, to be honest with you. And she's saying, "I'll make you dizzy, you bastard." Like, she's going to get into, like, a fist fight with somebody. Like, this is a version of reality where Vivi's getting into rough and tumble bar brawls with people, you know, which, honestly, I'm kind of interested in seeing that universe. You know what I mean? They need to do that. They need, after One Piece ends, there needs to be a spin-off manga of, like, the bad universe and how everybody shows up, you know? Oh, dude, I'm doing those One Piece tournament, like, crossover things we're doing right now every few months. The next one is going to be in December for the charity drive, like we do every year. And last time I included Bad Timeline Ace on the tournament, and it was so much fun. We're going to do Bad Timeline Vivi in this one. Anyway, then we have her at age 60, where she's a little bit more of a withered old crone. And in particular, she's dressed like a celestial dragon in this version. Wow, she went from Princess of Alabasta to pirate at age 40 to celestial dragon at age 60. So Vivi is a member of the Nefeltari family, and it literally, the only thing that would have changed with her being a celestial dragon and her not being a celestial dragon is her family deciding to stay at Marijois or leave. Because the whole idea is everybody that's a descendant of the founding families are celestial dragons. Vivi is technically a celestial dragon. It's just that the Nefeltari family chose to not stay in Marijois and go back to their home country, so the rest of the celestial dragons don't really acknowledge them, is essentially that. But in terms of, like, what makes the celestial dragons, I mean, yeah, that is applying to that. Of course, Vivi is not as evil as them, although in this version of reality, kind of, she's like, ah, Luffy, oh yeah, there used to be a guy like that. So she has this very withered kind of appearance. Some people have said she kind of looks like Dr. Kureha a little bit. You know, but obviously Dr. Kureha is much younger than Vivi looks here. Oh, obviously, of course, yes. Yeah, it is interesting that Oda drew her in the Celestial Dragon kind of garb a little bit there. So, yeah, there's a good timeline Vivi and bad timeline Vivi. That was interesting to see here. All right, what's next? Let's see. We got a question about York. Let's do that. Okay, so because York was the traitor amidst the satellites and wanted to become a member of the Celestial Dragons, and that's why she double-crossed everybody and sold out all the other satellites and the Stella and you know, came up with this strategy and leaked the information to the Gorosei and all that stuff. The question was, so does that mean that, like, Vegapunk at least had, like, a little bit of a desire to be a Celestial Dragon? Because each of the satellites are, like, different aspects of Vegapunk's personality. So Oda says, you know, if we define reason as righteousness, and this is written in the way that Shaka is, so like Shaka represents good, Lilith represents evil. The way that Oda writes reason here is good or righteousness, in the same thing that Shaka represented, okay? Then things like hatred towards the Celestial Dragons or the moral sense that tells us you must not kill people also comes from reason. But if that's the case, then perhaps everyone has a little Celestial Dragon inside of them too. The way that I'm extrapolating what Oda is saying here, and there might be a little bit of a translation barrier because this one's a little bit more philosophical, the way I interpreted this is having all of these different emotions, these different aspects of your psyche together, righteousness and a little bit of evil and a little bit of greed and a little bit of, the wisdom, that Pythagoras represents, and the wrath that represents Atlas. These are all things that make us human. Okay, and they sort of exist, and they're supposed to exist in one body that's sort of like balancing all of this stuff together, right? Like, I'm sure we've all had bouts of like rage in our lives before, right? But if we were nothing but rage, there's nothing to counterbalance that, things would go in a very different direction. So the way I'm interpreting this is, yeah, Vegapunk dividing up his personalities, so you have somebody like York, who's representative like the majority of the greed of Vegapunk. There's going to be problems there, right? Okay. So I guess the best way to say it is it's not just necessarily Vegapunk that wanted to be a Celestial Dragon. I think Oda is making a commentary here that any human that would have divided up their personality in the way that Vegapunk did would maybe have similar results to, like, oh, I divided up all my greed over here, all my evil over here, all my righteousness over here. One of them is going to end up like betraying you or going in a direction that you never would have if you were all balanced with having all of these different aspects of these shards of your personality together. I guess that's the best way to make sense out of it. Oda also just says, that's also just my extreme theory. Please just take it lightly. Don't take it too serious. But yeah. Let's see. We got a lot of funny, goofy ones. Oh, does Zunisha poop? This is an important question. There's also a question about Jinbei's dick that we're going to get to in a second here. But yeah, does Zunisha poop? And in which case, how big is the poop? Because Zunisha's like a giant elephant, right? And so Oda's like, oh, that's disgusting. But yeah, of course. I mean, obviously, Zunisha's a mammal. It's going to poop. I don't know why I specified mammals there. Only mammals poop. It's like, I mean, that is so yeah, Zunisha poops, and occasionally adventurers do make land there. It's a very swampy, muggy kind of place, and eventually the poops sort of sink beneath the waves. Very much like Nothing at All Island, that was mentioned to be the goldfish poop that the giant goldfish shits out at Little Garden, same kind of deal there. There is a non-zero number of islands in the One Piece world that are made of poop. There was that one time Marco mentioned that there was like tens of millions of islands in the One Piece world on Blue Planet. I wonder which percentage of those are just poop. Because there's a lot of big things that poop in this world. Everybody poops. Okay. So Jinbei's dick. Is it blue? Oda's like, yeah, it is. It would be weird if it wasn't, right? I mean, like, hey, these are questions for science. These are the questions Vegapunk would ask. No, it would be weird though, right? Like Jinbei is like, oh no, Jinbei's dick. Turns out it's red or yellow the whole time. It'd just be like, that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, no, his dick is blue. There we go. We've solved the mystery, ladies and gentlemen. That's what the One Piece was this whole time. Oh my goodness gracious. All right, some questions about the Scabbards. Now, this mostly involves the cover page that we just ended, Yamato's Holy Inari Shrine Pilgrimage. But this reader just asked, like, hey, Oda, what happened to all of the Scabbards, right? Like, they all went out to be daimyos, or what's going on with that? Oda just clarifies everything. So all of the factories and Okabore Town and the prisoner mines and everything like that, those were all shut down. And also they picked up Onigashima and they dropped it into the ocean, right? Because they didn't want to deal with that anymore, right? So they've effectively, that's like the first order of business of Momonosuke's reforms over the land of Wano. First reform, we're gonna pick up Onigashima and throw it in the ocean so we never have to see it again. And they're like, yeah, Momonosuke! So Momonosuke is 28 years old physically, but he still has the brain of an 8-year-old. So very much like a lot of children that were elevated to statuses of like kings or emperors or pharaohs back in the day. He realizes, I don't have all of the knowledge to really be a good shogun, to be a ruler quite yet. So that's why both Nekomamushi and Kinemon are staying in the Flower Capital with him to help him rule. So Oda essentially confirms that Kinemon is the man that's effectively running like the day-to-day operations in the Flower Capital. Not that Momonosuke is useless, he's still learning, okay? This is how he learns to become a good ruler. Like, Momonosuke is an elementary school student, effectively. I don't think he even knows that much advanced, like, mathematics, okay? Like, he's still probably, like, learning his multiplication tables, right? So, he's learning, he's getting there, but somebody has to run, like, the economy and going on in the background, and Momonosuke can't do that, all right? Now, thank God Kinemon is there, because he is the most brilliant character in all of One Piece, and I'm sure he'll manage it quite well. Nekomamushi also is staying in the Flower Capital, and he is ruling over the underworld, so he is the successor to Hyogoro, okay? So the underworld, the Yakuza, is led by Nekomamushi. Kinemon runs everything on the up and up in the Flower Capital. Then we have the regions of Wano, and we saw the daimyos of them during Yamato's cover story. Some of them were more successful than others. Denjiro is the daimyo of Kibi. I think he's doing pretty okay. When Yamato went to Kibi, a bunch of children were throwing rocks, and Denjiro stopped them from that, and then, hey, knock that off. And then they all went and had udon together, I think, so that was fun. So I think Denjiro is a good daimyo. Inuarashi and Raizo aren't the best. I think they're still, like, learning how to do their things, because Inuarashi is the ruler of Kuri, and then Raizo is the ruler of Udon. But all of these, like, kidnappings were happening in their regions, and like Inuarashi is like sitting there eating onigiri with Yamato, and Inuarashi's like, I'm very troubled by these kidnapping events. Very troubled indeed. Get off your ass, Inuarashi, and go start looking around. Yamato, like, there was a secret base in Udon in the shape of Who's helmet. He wasn't exactly hiding, you know what I mean? So then you have Raizo, who was the daimyo of Udon, that didn't even notice that. This was happening in your own backyard, Raizo. All right, whatever. Kawamatsu is the daimyo of Hakumai. He seemed to be having a good time. Everything seemed to be running very well in Hakumai. So good job, Kawamatsu. You're a good leader. Everybody's happy. I don't know. Unemployment is way down. Everybody's good in Hakumai. Everyone's good. And also there's a thriving sumo community. There you go. Then in the Ringo region, Kiku Nojo of the Lingering Snow is the daimyo there. And she's also doing a really swell job in Ringo. So I would say Kiku Nojo, Kawamatsu, Denjiro, they're going to be fine. Inuarashi and Raizo, I think you guys need to attend like a a seminar or something on how to be a good daimyo. Because, yeah, I mean, come on, Raizo. The guy had a secret base that wasn't even really a secret base right there. Like, what were you doing? Okay, anyway. Yeah, that's what's going on with the Scabbards. Now, speaking of cover stories, this comes from a reader that says, this is my first submission to the SBS. You know those cover stories that you do? My dad said that once a character appears in them, they'll never appear in the story again. Is that true or not? So, obviously, we know that that is not true. I'm assuming the person that sent this in, they did say this is my first submission. I'm assuming it's a kid that's just getting into One Piece. Maybe their dad was, like, messing with them a little bit, because clearly that's not the case, right? And Oda confirms. He's like, oh, what? That's not true at all. Like, and he even lists all of the characters that had the focus of the cover pages. We have Buggy, Kobe, Django, Hachi, Wapol, Ace, Garatsu, the Baroque Works team, Eneru, Cypherpole 9, Caribou, Jinbei, the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, Beiji, Germa, and Yamato. And a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have not just reappeared in the story, but like were very integral. Like Cypherpole 9 was very important during Egghead. Jinbei is a Straw Hat now. Caribou was also important and seems to be very important in the upcoming arc. Buggy, obviously. Kobe, obviously. Django, more of a side character, but he does show up again. Hachi is important. Wapol, had the rise back to the evil Black Drum Kingdom and is now part of he knows the secret of the world. He's one of the few people that know Emu exists, you know what I mean? So, yeah, clearly these characters show up again. Also confirms that Yamato will appear again in the story. So that's not the last time we're going to see Yamato in the cover story, right? This also sparked a lot of people like, Yamato for Straw Hat for real this time. Like, all right, we could go with that. Yamato for Straw Hat. Let's see. We have another question. This is just confirming that cover page art with Crocus sitting down with the person that I thought was Shiki for the longest time. Turns out it's Gaban. That's more of a digitally colored kind of situation there because they had blonde hair. Clearly, Gaban never had blonde hair. Maybe he dyed his hair for that one particular journey. I don't know. We all thought it was Shiki, but it was Gaban. But yeah, Oda just confirms that, yeah, he likes to wander around. I mean, he was the navigator of the Roger Pirates after all, so it makes sense that he'd like to travel the seas, and he gets restless every once in a while. So, he leaves home, says goodbye to Ripley and Colin, travels the seas for a bit, comes back to Elbaf. If the time dilation bullshit is real, then maybe he's only gone for like a very brief amount of time from their perspective. Very possible. We have another name for one of the families, one of the 20 families. So for the longest time, we did not know the family name of St. Roswald's clan, okay? So the first Celestial Dragon family we ever meet in the story at Sabaody, well, I guess we see Doflamingo earlier, but you know what I mean. The first proper family that's introduced as a Celestial Dragon family was St. Roswald, Sharia, and Charlos, okay? And then Luffy punches Charlos, okay? So we never knew what their family name was. We knew St. Roswald and Sharia and Charlos, but that was it. So I think this is because Oda might have gotten, like, he intended the family name to be Roswald, but then he also started using Roswald as the first name for Roswald. Their family name is Roswald. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Does that mean that St. Roswald's name is Roswald? Yes. Yes, it is. Now, that, like I said, that sounds like Oda goofed, and he's like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe when he, like, originally was sitting down and writing out the naming scheme of these characters, maybe he was like, oh, St. Roswald, as in the family name is Roswald. Oh, wait, no, it's the first name, the given name, not the surname. I messed up, whatever. His name is St. Roswald. Aren't his parents idiots? That's literally what Oda said. So, aside from that, it all makes sense now, okay? And let's pull up the reference chart. We got the 20 families reference table. Figarland, Don Quixote, Man Meyer, Remo Shifu, Bavette, Jay Garcia, Marcus, Top Man, Ethan Barron, Shepard, Nerona, Satchel, and Roswald, or Rosward, depending on the way that it's pronounced in Japanese. Also, the Nefertari family is one of the 20 families, but I put it down there in the corner because not one of the main families living there. We only have 6. We only have 6 left. 6 families left. In terms of other celestial dragons, I mean, we saw a lot of them during, like, Vegapunk's broadcast, a lot of random celestial dragons in the background. There is the celestial dragon Saint Jalmac, the one that went to the Goa Kingdom that shot Sabo's little boat, so he might be part of a family that we've already seen. He might be part of the Bavette family. We didn't really know anybody from the Bavette family. Their name was just mentioned, not seen, but he probably might be a member of that or another family that we already know about. But yeah, we got 6 more family names that we've yet to see, so I love this so much because Oda will introduce concepts and then kind of seemingly forget about them. He doesn't forget, it's just that these things are not important yet. So we only knew about like 2 or 3 family names of the celestial dragons for like well over a decade or so. And it's like, are we ever going to learn more about them? And it was like, yes, we will, but like it's not important yet. But now it is. So now we are getting to hear all of the 20 names, and we're going to find out about them fairly soon, I would imagine. But yeah, St. Roswald's name is just St. Roswald, which I can also see celestial dragons doing that because they are very arrogant and they love themselves so much. I could see them just naming them after their family names because that's just how arrogant they are. So there's a couple of other questions that aren't as important. Here's a quick one. Kuma's ship that he's sailing around in on his journey in his flashback that has Bonney's drawing as the Jolly Roger. His ship was called the Leap Out Jory, after Jory Bonney, after his daughter, right? So there's that. Oda draws Luffy with contact lenses. That's creepy. There's that. Let's see. And I think that's all of the major questions. So, yeah, I think we're just going to cut to the end here. Last question, yes, is about Bonney. Speaking of her. So Bonney, of course, for most of the story, kept her adult form when she was the captain of the Bonney Pirates, okay, with the age fruit, right? But you may have noticed, ever since the revelation of her learning about her father's situation, and especially after the battle on Egghead, she has maintained her regular age, like her actual age of 12 years old. And people have been asking, like, oh, okay, is she just going to remain in that form from now on? And Oda confirms that, like, well, yeah, because for the longest time, she felt like she had to be an adult in order to be the captain of a pirate crew, and that made it more convenient to find her father, and she was trying to like grow up really fast and be a really strong pirate, right? But now that she knows everything about what happened with Kuma, and she reconciled with Vegapunk and everything, and she's with the Straw Hats specifically, she feels safe enough that she doesn't have to pretend to be somebody she doesn't have to be, you know? She's just like, she can just be a kid, all right? She doesn't have to worry about living in this really tough, dangerous world anymore, okay? Now, does this mean that she's going to be traveling with the Straw Hats for, you know, like further adventures? I'm not really sure. I saw some people saying that she's going to stay with the Straw Hats. She's even going to be a Straw Hat because of that. Honestly, if there still is an Elbaf at the end of this arc, I'm not really sure where this is going. But her hanging out on Elbaf with Lilith and then Kuma also there, and then eventually them waking up the cryogenically suspended clone of Vegapunk like that, I could see their storyline going that direction. So I don't know if she's going to stick around with the Straw Hats for the rest of the adventure. But it is really nice that she's just like, she can relax now. She doesn't have to worry about like, no, I'm tough, I'm an adult, I'm a pirate. It's like, Bonney, it's okay. Now you could just relax, all right? You don't have to worry about this anymore, right? So that's a really nice way to end this SBS. So, yeah, a lot of stuff here, man. A lot of information we got about the timelines, the calendars of the One Piece world, and the new family name we got, which is an old family name we got, and what was the other big one here? Oh, Vivi, yeah, depicted older and stuff, and then, you know, stuff about the cover pages and the Scabbards and everything. This is a really solid SBS, I gotta say. And I think all the SBSs from here on out, they're pretty going to be a lot of info dumps for a lot of things because this is just wild. All right, well, anyway, that's the video. Hope you all enjoyed. Let me know down below which SBS question you thought that was the most interesting. Yeah, this is Teching 101 signing out. Later, everybody.